Welcome to Build Your Best Business. I'm your host, Eric Holtzclaw. Build Your Best Business focuses on the entrepreneurial journey. What does it take to successfully start, manage, grow, and eventually exit a business? Today, we're talking with Michael Greenberg. He's a chief interviewer and strategist with Call for Content. So he and I have similar titles. I call myself chief strategist of Laddering Works, and I think we'll have a good conversation today around what it takes to really build a business. Like once you get it started, if nobody knows who you are or what you do, you might as well close it up and go back home. So, Michael, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me today.
So talk to us a little bit about Call for Content. What does Call for Content do?
So Call for Content is a B2B content marketing agency. We use what we call the Call for Content process, which is a research-focused owned media strategy to position a company as an expert or authority in a highly targeted niche.
Okay. All right. So you said a lot of words there. So we're going to break those down a little bit. And so number one, let's just break down, and you and I will just tell everyone that's listening have a very similar, we both go to the same church. Like we have the content, but we've seen it work. Like I know it works. It takes a little bit of time. You know, there's not often patience sometimes for it. And one of the things that I think you guys fix that's a real problem is I can't market your business if I can't tell your story, right? Like I can't get anyone to pay attention. So how do you guys approach a business like that? And how do you convince a B2B owner that they need to do content? Because there's sometimes reticent to get into that space.
Yeah. So I came to content because I saw and worked with so many businesses that just didn't have the online presence or the content to say, yeah, we know what we're talking about.
Got it. Yeah.
And if nobody can look you up and confirm that you know what you're talking about, then it's going to be really hard for anything but a close referral to come in, or for you to have a direct sales relationship. I primarily work with B2B service businesses or SaaS companies. And that means that they have high value relationships, and they're relationships that take a long time to develop.
Okay. Yeah.
So that means that the content my clients put out under their brand has to really relate to those people they're trying to attract.
Yeah.
Because in a market where there might only be 10,000 customers worldwide, you've got to really focus in on the 1,000 that are best served by your product.
Okay. And so in that approach, and I agree 100%. So are you going in and just helping them extract that story? And so what's interesting, because they never tell you the interesting story, right? I mean, when I talk with them, and I'll prep people for news media interviews or whatever, and they'll start to tell me and I'm like, I'm so bored. Like you've said nothing interesting, right?
Yeah. And we start with about an hour and a half interview. I use it's an almost reverse version of the interview that I use to identify marketing personas.
Okay.
We use on our own client first.
Okay.
And we use that to help develop the brand message and identity that are going to work for them personally. Okay. Because especially for small businesses, and especially in B2B, with those relationships, it's one or two or three experts at the top of your business in many cases. And those are the people who are really providing the power to move the business forward in terms of authority and expertise.
And so talk a little more about that. The B2B, when I walk into them, you know, there's a lot of them wanting the business to be the story. Like we want everything to come from the brand, and, you know, they almost hide behind it. And prior to 2008, that was an appropriate approach, or could be an appropriate approach. But today I want to hear from a person. Like I want to know who that person is. It's nice there's a company, but you know, how do you get them to finally realize they've got to get behind the brand?
I think that's one they come to before they come to us a lot of times.
Okay.
A lot of clients come to me having worked with an SEO firm, or what is now called a content marketing firm that was an SEO firm in the past.
Yes.
And
hint, spend less on SEO. So.
They don't do the work that needs to be done.
Right.
Because they're trying to get big numbers. You don't need 10,000 visitors on your website if one sale's worth $100,000.
Absolutely.
And so for me, when I look at all that, I see the process backwards. And when I talk to my clients, they're sales first almost every time.
Yeah.
And content is the single best marketing tactic to support sales that I've found.
Yeah. And so talk to me how you got to this. So your background, you and I were sharing that a little bit before the show. I'm a recovering technologist who, is now a content marketing and operations guy. So what was your past?
Yeah, I come from a similar background, though without quite the same depth of experience. So I, about 5-6 years ago now, dropped out of college the first time I was going, when most of my professors got poached back to the private sector.
Yeah.
I went to Silicon Valley, moved to Mountain View, so hard up.
That's where both of the startups I've worked with were out of Mountain View. So yeah.
I was just about 2 miles south of the Quad.
Okay.
You know that Google campus?
Yeah, yeah.
So
it used to be the SGI campus, Silicon Graphics. Yeah. I'm old enough that I worked for Silicon Graphics. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I went to a coding boot camp out there. While I was there, I knew a little bit about logic before and architecture for data structures because my brother's an engineer. So he tried to force that down my throat. But I went to coding boot camp, learned to actually code, got hired by a company to get through their prototype, did that, and didn't have the technical chops to really carry on as CTO. But I knew enough to be dangerous in marketing and operations, so I moved over to COO, stayed there, helped build out sales and marketing, and then left to go consult on growth strategy and rapid prototyping.
Got it. Okay.
And so that over time, I worked with companies, saw this issue in marketing where they weren't positioned. I couldn't do what I really wanted to do with them because they didn't have that starting point in place. And I went to the drawing board and started building a content marketing process that I knew could be repeatably implemented for at least my favorite clients to work with, if not everyone.
And so how did you choose who your favorite clients to work with were going to be?
Customer size.
Okay.
It really came down to a combination of size and space. I really have only worked in B2B.
Okay.
And I much prefer the size of the deals in B2B. So I knew I wanted to stay there.
So you like the fact that one deal may be worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
Versus finding
I'm only one guy.
Right. Okay. Versus finding 1 million people to buy a $1 item, you find that one person who can buy the $1 million product.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I knew a lot about services. I knew they also popped up quickly and they could grow quickly, faster than some other kinds of companies. Mm-hmm. Because with services, you scale on people. It's a blessing and a curse.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I wanted to start there. And then over time, with my background in technology and my existing network there, I've just sort of picked up clients who work with software.
And so in your process then, so you're doing this kind of initial interview, and then is your team creating the content for the customer, or are you just telling them what kind of content they need to create?
We do a mix.
Okay.
We really try not to create content for customers because that's not going to be the best content in a lot of cases. Since we try to instill authentic voice from our customers into everything, I try to push everyone to have a podcast so we can get them on air. Mm-hmm. And then we also interview them rather than writing or ghostwriting a blog for them.
Got it.
So I'll interview them, get their opinions, get the words they might use to describe things, and we'll try to inject that into the final, where they might not do all the writing, but they'll certainly provide half the words or more.
Okay. And in your initial introduction, to kind of break words down a little bit further, you used the word owned content, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
we only produce content that goes on our client sites.
Okay. And so just theory or belief system behind that?
It's where you start with content.
Okay.
At the end of the day, if you're building for digital, you're going to have a website. And if you're not building for digital, then you're probably just building a business on business cards, and we're not going to be talking anyway.
Right.
So if you're building for digital, you have a website, and that website is the final piece of content before the sale in all likelihood.
Yeah.
So we start there.
It's an important point you just made. It's the final point of sale, right? So people search your content, they look at what you talk about, And then because they know if they visit your website, they might get trapped into like giving you their contact information. Like there's something,
right.
That we're smart. We're smart buyers. We know that we want to look for everything we can and learn about your business, and then we'll end up in that last piece.
Yeah. I mean, I know if you're on my radar, then if you click on a website link, I will know you clicked on it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's pretty much expected for all marketers these days, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is the challenge. Like having a technology background is a good thing because we understand the technology stack, and traditional marketing doesn't necessarily, they went to school for Don Draper, right? Like I'm going to create the big idea and the big campaign. And then all of a sudden it became like, how do you cobble together all this technology and make it work in a way that you're aware and you know what's going on? So it's been a very transitional market or space. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think the thing that throws most people off are ads.
Yeah.
Both because clients will come to me saying, we tried Facebook ads or we tried LinkedIn ads and they don't work.
Yeah.
But ads will almost always work if you use them right.
Right.
There are just so many ways to use them, and there's so much variety. And that's why we focus on the owned media first. We don't work with the ads. We don't work with the other stuff.
Got it.
We get one thing working that focuses with sales, because sales is where our clients already are. If they're not marketing, let's build the first thing to help them with what they do.
Good to know. So we're going to go to a commercial break, and when we get back, I want to talk a little bit about maybe Michael's top 5 things that companies are either doing poorly or well, or give me a little bit of advice, because you're in kind of a similar space I am, and we both see them making some interesting mistakes. So are doing some things well. So we'll be back in just a second. Listening to Build Your Best Business, I'm talking to Michael Greenberg. He's Chief Interviewer and Strategist at Call for Content. We'll be back in just a minute.
Eric, tell us about Laddering Works.
So Laddering Works is a company that helps other businesses in one of 2 ways.
Okay.
So your company is either growing and you're not exactly sure how to keep up. So you need to scale operations, maybe raise some money, those kind of things.
So growing too fast.
Growing too fast. Okay. Growing too fast. You got kind of structural, you walk in every day, there's a fire. You've been doing it longer than 3 years or 1,000 days, and you still feel like you can't step away from the business and take a vacation. So we help companies on that side. So sort of operational support, looking at their financing, seeing if there's a way that we can help them, get to the next level. Or you're a company that's not doing any marketing at all. So you are maybe stalled. Your business has gotten to a certain level. You make a certain amount of money every year, but you've never gotten above that. And we come in and build marketing structure. So both of them are operational at the end of the day. It's about creating a process and a way to approach it that's strategic. It's that owners don't often know how to do both of those. So they're really good at sales, which means they may need operational structure because they're out signing more customers than they know what to do with. Or they've built a beautiful product that's the best kept secret. And so they need somebody to come in and help them market that product. And so that's the kind of businesses we look for. We come in as a stopgap, and we work with a company for somewhere around 12 to 18 months typically, solve those problems for them and leave them better than we found them. And we're back. You're listening to Build Your Best Business. I'm your host, Eric Holtzclaw, talking today with a fellow chief strategist. I don't call myself an interviewer, but I probably should. Michael Greenberg. He's with Call for Content. They focus on creating content for B2B, which is such an important part of the marketing mix nowadays that is often not understood or overlooked or feels like this mystery. So I said in the first piece that when we got back, I wanted to get kind of your top 5, and it might be 4 and it might be 7. But what are the things that you see the companies either should be doing that they're not doing well? Like just off the top of your head, what are some of those areas, and what would you advise?
Yeah. So the number one thing I see is just a bad website that doesn't have if your website doesn't look like it has been made in the past 3 years, then I think your company is failing.
Yes. And I tell everybody put their websites on a diet. Like get rid of the 5,000 pages and put it into your content. Like make if you want to keep it somehow, let's turn it into a blog or a piece. Like, I don't want to read it on your site. So give your site a diet.
That's exactly what we've been doing this past month at Call for Content, and that's what I try to tell everyone.
Yeah.
I like one page. It's a sales page. It has a contact button and a blog.
Yeah.
An about page if you're really feeling big.
Right. It's basically a brochure on steroids with a really honking blog. So
yeah. Because that's really mobile friendly and easy to keep updated and design.
Right.
I like Squarespace for it, but just about any website builder, you can probably put one together or find a decent template to get started. And then upgrading to something custom really is just signaling that you have your stuff together and that you have a serious business, because you can put 5 or 10K behind a brand new website. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like the recommendation of Squarespace and Wix and others. There's several that have, if you don't have a good website or you have one that's, I mean, I'd rather see you put something up that is like that, like a templated, sexier, newer looking site than the one that, like you and I said, looked like it's from 1985 before the internet. So, okay. So website, make sure the website's in a good place.
And then number 2 is put out content.
And do you suggest a cadence? Do you suggest, like, what does that mean in your mind?
Put out regular content.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what your cadence is, so long as it's there and you're putting it out, and you're putting out multiple pieces a year. I recommend a podcast because personally, I think they're probably the cheapest thing to start if you don't like writing.
Mm-hmm.
If you can write, then just start a blog and set aside 15 minutes or 30 minutes to write every day, and you'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
But it's really the putting out content that's important.
Yeah, putting out content, making sure you promote it when you put it out, because that's the crazy thing is I'll see people spend all this time and they promote it like once, and it's...
See, that's actually my thing that I'm not 100% on.
Okay.
And my reasoning for this goes back to sales.
Yeah.
I work with some clients that are sales-focused organizations through and through. They're not going to get leads through marketing. And every single ebook, every single piece of content on their site is locked down. So you can't get it without giving up that content, contact information.
Yeah.
And that works really well for them. They don't promote because the people who are going to them come from conferences. Yeah. And they know that. They know how they get their customers.
Yeah. And so how narrow then is the niche of the customers that you're working with?
So the customers I work with, that specific case is somebody who sells into enterprise. Mm-hmm. So for enterprise sales, a lot of cases, they're not going to have some of the same marketing materials that I might put out for somebody selling to a small or medium-sized business.
Yeah, yeah.
And we work with companies generally in the 1 to 10 million range.
Right, okay.
But we work with them on any sort of B2B sale.
Okay, all right. So doing a podcast, what are some of the other... I've done a podcast since 2011. I did it because I was told to stand on stages and I wasn't comfortable at that point in my life. And I was like, and we didn't have video. So I was like, hey, I can do microphone and I can cut it up if I need to, or never run it if I didn't like it. But so I had some very different reasons. In fact, I was only going to do 42 interviews and now I'm on like 1,000 some crazy number now. So some of the benefits that you see the podcast for the customers you're working with.
There is no other way that you're going to get 30 minutes of somebody listening to you on a consistent basis like that.
Yeah.
If you find one, you probably have a class.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I agree. And it's a great way to get to know either prospects and also customers. Like it's just it's a non-threatening, non-salesy, even though it is, thing that you can do that establishes a relationship in a very different way.
The warmest cold intro you can have.
Exactly. I like that. Right. Warmest cold intro. Okay. So what else is in your list?
Don't spam email. Okay. Going out of those, I love cold email as much as the next marketer, because we can put in 1,000 leads at the top and get 3 qualified ones at the bottom. But don't, especially if I'm your LinkedIn connection, don't send out a mass emailer to me advertising your business. Take the time to actually customize.
Yeah.
your email campaigns, you can do a lot more sending 50 good emails than you can sending 1,000 bad ones.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds, I mean, there's a guy here, Sangram, and I'm going to get his last name wrong there, who did like flip the funnel. So you've got a lot of the same kind of philosophies in that too. The who is it that you want and how do you get to them versus the old funnel of put a bunch of people at the top and then see what sifts out the bottom, you know?
Yeah. That makes perfect sense to me. That the reasoning for that is because we can target people now on digital.
Right.
You had to broadcast all your advertisements back in Mad Men days.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not targeting and you're actually, this is a good number 4 or 5, not sure what rule we're on now, but target. If your description of who you're targeting is not to the point where somebody can say, yes, I know that person, or can point them out in a crowded room, then you're not targeting detailed enough.
Yeah. And it sounds like, and you said, I think a minute ago, did you talk about the concept of personas and establishing personas? Yeah.
That's what we use.
Yeah. My research, when I did the research company, we moved because I owned the research company during the period of time that the world went from mass to individual. Yeah. And we saw a transition. So most of our work at the beginning was just, can they use it? Can anybody use it? And then we went, and by the time everything had switched, it was who would use this, like building the product in a very different way, and a very different thought. So the problem I run into with personas is regrettably it's a watered down word that marketing agencies they took over and they write them in a vacuum. You know, they're like, oh, the person's this old and da 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 da. And unless, like you said, you can specifically know who the person is, the language they use, and it's always like the 1 or 2 words. Like it's just the change of 1 or 2 words that makes a significant difference in the way that this is going to impact.
Yeah. What do they call their customers is normally the biggest one that I see people mess up.
Yeah. Meaning from the perspective of like if they call them
clients, or if they call them clients or customers, or if you're in a position where you're working with vendors, you have to talk about everyone using the jargon used.
Yeah.
And that it's those that signal a lot. Like when I was starting out selling call for content, we were selling a lot to executive coaches.
Right.
And I wasn't using clients. I was using customers because we had been selling to another group. We switched clients and saw about a 10% bump across the board.
Interesting. Yeah.
Just because that's the word they use to describe their.
Yeah. And that does define a very different relationship, how they talk about it. If it's clients, customers, vendors, partners, you know, I had somebody who was selling me a bunch of stuff and she's like, we want to partner with you. And I'm like, when you buy some things from me, we'll be partners. But right now you're a vendor. Sorry. You know? So yeah. So what else what do you see as the future? Is it a continued content thing? Do you think this is a fad? Like where do you think?
I think it's become the media.
Okay.
I'm building call for content, so I have the machine to build my own podcast network and media network and become the media myself. And I see that as the best route forward for most brands. As we move more towards the native advertising and various branded content rather than, or more interactive advertising, we move more to content. Because content, and if you ever get a chance to read The Content Trap, which is a great book, but very, very long and a little boring for me because it's an academic book.
Yeah.
But the point of The Content Trap is that content is about the community around it, not in fact the content you create.
Got it.
So content is by itself worthless in digital because we can just copy paste it 1,000 times and we create a near infinite amount of it every day. But content can be valuable in relation to a specific person or category.
Okay, so Content Trap, I'll take a look at that. And a book for you is Fourth Turning. So read.
I love that book.
Fourth Turning. We're in the fourth turning, which is why all this makes so much sense. And that would make sense for that conversation too. Like content's about a community. It's about somebody and the vetting. Like we have this whole thing going on with bigger unnamed either social media platforms or outlets that you can't trust. Like you have to know the person you're getting the advice from and that you're like that person and that you believe in what they say to truly survive the what's right and what's real and what's not. So yeah, very interesting. Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, so I've been talking today with Michael Greenberg. He is the Chief Interview and Strategist of Call for Content, which if you are B2B or B2C or you want to sell to people, you should be establishing and creating content and creating unique content that educates, not just sells. Don't tell me about your speeds and feeds, and I can look that up. I don't care. I'm already bored. I want to hear the story. So you've been listening to Build Your Best Business. Until next time, what are you going to do to build your best business?